Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. How's it going? Today I've got a topic that's going to flip your understanding of history a full 180 degrees. It's strange, intriguing, and packed with mysteries. A story about American history you won't find in traditional textbooks. So grab your popcorn, get comfortable, and let's dive in. Remember hearing how back in the mid-19th century, mail delivery in America was a total mess? Stagecoaches were constantly getting ambushed, and a trip to California took months instead of a mere 24 days. But then, what about the legend of the Pony Express, the fastest mail service in history, which supposedly delivered President Lincoln's inauguration speech to California in just 7 days and 17 hours? That legend was born and died within a year and a half when the transcontinental telegraph was completed. But here's what truly puzzles me. Is it really plausible that all those massive, strikingly similar buildings were constructed in just a few decades in the late 19th century solely for mail delivery, and this mail was only transported by horse-drawn carriages and wagons? And the population figures for these cities, did they justify the sheer scale of these structures? Official numbers suggest these cities didn't have the population to make such monumental buildings logical. Could these buildings have been part of an advanced civilization like Tartaria that existed before our history was portrayed as so primitive? Something feels off, right? And let's not forget the story of airmail appearing in 1870 with claims of 500 pounds of mail being transported by balloons. Did it ever arrive? Nobody knows. Was this an attempt to hide advanced transportation technology that was already in place, inherited from a previous civilization? Now, this is where the plot thickens and what will really make you think: the grand World's Fairs and incredible amusement parks. You need to know that most of these fairs and amusement parks were built and opened in less than a year in many different locations, and then they burned down. Yes, they burned down, sometimes intentionally, sometimes by accident. There were over 75 World's Fairs before 1870 alone. These fairs all over the world were excessively lavish, incredibly expensive, attracted millions of people, and brought in resources and people from every corner of the globe. Were these extravagant buildings originally in existence, part of the magnificent Tartarian civilization, and then intentionally burned to erase their traces and make us believe they were just temporary exhibitions? Even stranger, there was global participation from distant places like Samoa, Alaska, China, South America, Hawaii, and more. These people traveled with all their equipment across oceans to attend these massive events. How did they communicate with people around the world to get them to come, arrange their travel and accommodation, meet them at ports, and then set up such incredibly complex displays, all with horse-drawn carriages to build these exhibitions? Your mind will reel. Doesn't this suggest the existence of a highly advanced global communication and transportation network, perhaps part of the legacy of a forgotten civilization like Tartaria, which has been erased from history books? At the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, it said that half of America's population at the time attended. Half the population, folks! So how did they find out? Where did they stay? And how did they even get there? You'll be shocked when you see some of the most stunning structures that were supposedly for education, community, and entertainment. The fair's stated purpose kept changing, celebrating the opening of the Panama Canal, or gathering electricity, or celebrating the Louisiana Purchase. It was a different excuse every time. And the biggest surprise? Those who were building this fair needed to excavate record amounts of earth and fill to construct the exhibits on or near water. Why near water specifically? Because, as we'll learn, water was a conductor of energy and essential to power and light the exhibits at night. Is this evidence of an advanced understanding of free energy or hydropower technology that the Tartarian civilization might have used and which was later concealed? Something strange here, too. I focused on the fairs from 1850 to 1930 because this period was still before commercial airplanes, highways, and massive stone-moving engines. What's astonishing is that during this time, 22 international exhibitions were held during major economic crises and even during World War I. How was this even possible in the midst of a world war? Just look at a quick list of some of these fairs in 1914 alone. Not to mention the severe economic crises like the Great Depression and bank panics. All these crises were happening, yet they were still staging fairs of such immense scale. Does this suggest that these fairs weren't built during that period, but were merely repurposed existing monumental buildings from a prior civilization, like Tartaria, and exploited under the pretext of exhibitions? Something is seriously off, folks. The Great Exhibition in London in 1851 lasted only 6 months. Over 14,000 exhibitors from all over the world, and 6,039,722 visitors. That's a third of Britain's entire population at the time. This was the first World's Fair, and the Crystal Palace was an architectural and engineering marvel. Later, the building was moved and rebuilt on a grander scale in 1854 in South London, and then it was completely destroyed by fire on November 30, 1936. Why, folks? Why? Was the destruction of these architectural masterpieces by fire part of a systematic campaign to erase the traces of the Tartarian civilization, which might have built these astonishing structures? The World's Fair in Paris in 1855 lasted only 6 months, and then it was destroyed. The fair covered 16 hectares with 34 participating countries and attracted over 5 million visitors. The 1889 Paris World's Fair is where the most famous structure still standing today was built, the Eiffel Tower. This fair also lasted only 6 months and drew over 32 million visitors. So, what was the purpose of the Eiffel Tower? It showcased the latest advancements in science and technology. Thomas Edison visited this fair to see a pavilion featuring his latest inventions, like the phonograph. Another technology on display was the safe elevator developed by the Otis Company. Imagine, Otis built elevators that took people up the legs of the Eiffel Tower to the first level. And when journalists worried about the safety of the elevators, Otis technicians filled one elevator with 3 tons of lead, then cut the cable with an axe in front of reporters. The elevator stopped 10 feet from the ground thanks to Otis's safety brakes. Was the Eiffel Tower just a temporary exhibit for existing technology from the Tartarian civilization, and the real purpose was to pretend to discover this technology and then attribute it to other names? And this next part will shock you. Bizarre exhibits of incubator babies at World's Fairs. Infants battling for their lives were brought from hospitals to showcase new incubators at many World's Fairs. Some even died due to infection from human contact. These displays continued until 1940. Martin Cooney, a German man, quickly realized that this strange display would save children's lives and that the public would pay to see the babies in incubators. The sight was so unusual that people flocked to the exhibit, paying money, while doctors were giving new life to 6 babies. He would get the babies for free from hospitals across the country. These exhibits charged 25 cents for admission. Later, the incubators were modified with glass walls to separate the infants from visitors, which reduced infant exposure. Today, these units are known as isolates and are an essential part of neonatal intensive care. Was using children in this way part of a larger plan to manipulate public perception, hiding the extent of healthcare advancements that might have existed in the Tartarian civilization, then slowly rediscovering them? The thing that most captivated the imagination of everyone who attended these fairs was the new electricity. Most of the fair ran on alternating current, AC, and visitors experienced the changes electricity would bring to their daily lives. There was an elevated train that carried 50,000 visitors an hour, electric cars, electric boats in the canals, and moving walkways. On May 1, 1893, President Grover Cleveland pressed a button to illuminate the entire fair. It was gold and bore the dates 1492, 1893. This fair showcased an insane technological leap. Westinghouse reserved space in the building for Nikola Tesla. Tesla displayed his early AC inventions: motors, circuit breakers, generators, phosphorescent signs, fluorescent lamps, and neon lights. Even skeptics like Lord Kelvin admitted the superiority of AC. His 12,000 horsepower generators lit the fair efficiently and safely. In 1893, Westinghouse Electric designed a large AC system for Niagara Falls, which began operating on August 26, 1895. Niagara Falls was the final triumph of Tesla's polyphase AC electricity, which lights the entire world today. Almost every other World's Fair was lit by free energy. Was all this free illumination possible thanks to advanced free energy technology used by the Tartarian civilization, but presented as new discoveries by Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla, when in reality it was merely a reintroduction of what already existed? People flocked to Chicago to see the future. The Chicago World's Fair introduced an astonishing list of new products that are still around today: juicy fruit gum, Cracker Jacks, spray paint, and shredded wheat. The list also included electrically powered products that would transform American lives: fax machines, telephones, electric railways, neon lights, bed warmers, fans, heaters, and a universal electric belt. There was a completely electric kitchen with a small heater, a hot plate, a broiler, a kettle, and a cooking pot. The touch of a button activated Great Alice's motor in the machinery hall in Chicago. In one profound moment, the electricity of the Columbus Fair lit up the entire exhibition, ushering in the age of electricity. Were these new products, in fact, a technological legacy from an advanced Tartarian civilization, slowly introduced to the world as modern inventions to conceal the true progress of that civilization? Sophia Hayden, one of the few female architects in 19th century America and a graduate of MIT, designed her first project, the Woman's Building, a two-story, 80,000 square foot structure. What's strange is that Hayden, while still young, suffered a nervous breakdown at the end of this project and never designed another building afterward. Why? What happened? This idea was very revolutionary at the time and wasn't enthusiastically supported by some fair authorities. When the World's Fair opened in 1893, equal rights for women were still a dream. American women couldn't vote and were excluded from public life, but times were slowly changing. Prominent women spoke at the fair on many issues. Was Sophia Hayden's disappearance just a nervous breakdown, or was there a conspiracy to silence her after she discovered something about the origin of these great buildings, that they weren't new constructions, but repurposed structures of ancient Tartarian civilization? Imagine this. In the heart of Buffalo, New York, in 1901, a World's Fair called the Pan American Exposition was held. This fair is remembered today for one thing only. It was the site of the assassination of U.S. President William McKinley in the Temple of Music on September 6, 1901. The fair was brilliantly illuminated at night. The Thomas A. Edison Company filmed the fair by day and created a panorama of it by night. So there was lighting and photography and everything. What's strange, the day before the incident, McKinley himself gave a speech at the fair, saying that these exhibitions accelerate human genius and expand and illuminate people's daily lives. But here's the surprise. At this fair, the then-new X-ray machine was on display. Yet, when McKinley was shot, doctors hesitated to use the machine to locate the bullet in his body. Why? Because they didn't know what side effects it might have. Imagine, the technology existed, but they didn't know how to use it. Even stranger than all of this, the operating room at the fair's emergency hospital had no electric lighting. Yes, you heard that right. Despite the fact that the facades of all the buildings were covered with thousands of electric lights, the most crucial place to save the president's life had no electricity. Doctors used a dish to reflect sunlight onto the operating table while treating McKinley. A question arises: why? How could this happen at a fair that was full of light? Is this a deliberate concealment of advanced lighting technology that the Tartarian civilization used and which was not available to the public, even in a life-or-death situation for a president? Something is not right, folks. Let's move on to another fair, the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. This fair had over 1,500 buildings, connected by about 75 miles, 121 kilometers of roads and walkways. It was said to be impossible to even take a quick tour of everything in less than a week. The Palace of Agriculture alone covered about 20 acres. That's a complete city, not just an exhibition. So how did such a huge number of people attend? And how did they travel? And where did they sleep? These are all very puzzling questions if you think about them logically for that era. Does this massive number of visitors suggest that the city's capacity was much greater than announced, perhaps due to an ancient infrastructure inherited from the Tartarian civilization? This fair saw some crazy things, like wireless telephony, the radiophone, an early fax machine, the telegraph, the personal automobile making its first appearance, and even the airplane. There was even a balloon competition, even though the Wright brothers made their first airplane flight in 1903, just 1 year before this fair. Were these inventions not new discoveries, but merely a reintroduction of advanced technologies that already existed in the Tartarian civilization and were represented to the world as modern achievements? In the late 19th century, many American cities built something called crop palaces or grain palaces to promote themselves and their agricultural products. What's strange is that the Corn Palace in 1921 was rebuilt with a different architectural design. And in 1937, they added Russian onion domes and Moroccan minarets. Imagine Moroccan minarets on a corn palace in America. Why? And does this explain why there are huge post offices in places that didn't have large populations at the time? An 1888 map says Sioux City's population was only 35,000. So a massive building for 35,000 people to deliver letters by horse-drawn carriage? Were these domes and minarets not aesthetic additions, but an original part of the architectural style of the Tartarian civilization, which authorities are trying to hide under flimsy names like crop palaces? Something just doesn't add up. And even stranger, over 300 large amusement parks were built across America from the 1880s to the 1920s. That's 5 amusement parks per state, and then they burned down or were demolished. Coney Island alone saw 3 major amusement park redevelopments. The White City was a common name for dozens of amusement parks in America, England, and Australia. These cities took their name from the White City at the 1893 Chicago World's Columbian Exposition. Competition was fierce, often causing these amusement parks to close due to high costs, maintenance, or insurance. And even stranger, many of them succumbed to fire. Only one park named White City is still operating today, Denver White City, which opened in 1908 and is now called Lakeside Amusement Park. Were these white cities not temporary amusement parks, but real cities from the Tartarian civilization with distinctive architecture? And were they destroyed by fire to conceal their existence? Then some of their parts rebuilt and called amusement parks to justify their temporary existence and subsequent disappearance? Let's head to San Francisco, which was once called the Western Tartarian capital. Here is a direct reference to the Tartarian civilization and its connection to the city. Cliff House. This house on the oceanfront was first built in 1858 and then rebuilt 5 times due to renovation or damage. What's strange is that it survived the 1906 earthquake with minor damage, but burned down the very next year. Why? Does the repeated occurrence of mysterious fires and rebuilding suggest a continuous attempt to erase the origin of these great buildings and link them to the Tartarian civilization, then attribute their rebuilding to other entities? Sutro Baths in San Francisco. Opened in 1890, they were the largest indoor swimming pool in the world. Built by Adolf Sutro in 1896, these baths used seawater from the ocean beach to fill 6 saltwater pools, as well as 1 freshwater pool and hundreds of changing rooms. The baths were next to the Cliff House and were destroyed by a mysterious fire on June 26, 1966, directly before demolition was to begin, and 2 weeks before the owners went bankrupt. This led to strong suspicions of fraud and arson, as the owners, who had insured the place for huge sums, received a large settlement and quickly left the city. Its ruins remain one of San Francisco's most mysterious places to this day. Why are these massive structures always destroyed by mysterious fires, especially when they contained Egyptian mummies and rare artifacts? Were these artifacts evidence of civilizational links between Tartaria and other civilizations? And were they intentionally destroyed to hide these connections? Just 9 years after the devastating 1906 earthquake, San Francisco hosted the Panama Pacific International Exposition in 1915 to celebrate the opening of the Panama Canal. This city showed over 18 million visitors from around the world that it was the city that knew how. Visitors all expressed a sense of wonder. What's strange, there were no bridges across the San Francisco Bay, and the city's population, which was still recovering from the earthquake, was less than 200,000. So, how did those 18 million visitors arrive? Where did they sleep? And how did they get around? The same questions keep repeating. Does this suggest that the city's capacity was much greater than announced, perhaps thanks to an ancient infrastructure inherited from the Tartarian civilization? This fair featured impressive things like a 5-acre replica of the Panama Canal, where visitors rode on a moving platform and listened to information about the canal through telephone receivers. And the first transcontinental telephone call, made by Alexander Graham Bell to the fairgrounds before its opening. Electricity was the most prominent achievement. The scintillator, a collection of huge searchlights on a barge in the bay, cast 48 lights in 7 colors through the San Francisco fog. And if natural fog wasn't present, a steam locomotive produced artificial fog. They were controlling the fog. Were these amazing technologies, including fog control and massive illumination, part of advanced technology inherited by this civilization from Tartaria? And were they concealed as new inventions? On the last midnight, the last call played from the Tower of Jewels. The final visitor departed, and the fair's lights dimmed forever. The Tower of Jewels, which cost $413,000 to build, was sold for just $9,000 to a demolition company. Its jewels were sold to souvenir collectors for $1 each. The colossal statues were destroyed along with their arches. By 1917, the demolition was complete, and the land was returned to its original state. Does this ease of destroying such massive and costly buildings and returning the land to its original state suggest that they weren't built to be temporary, but already existed from a previous civilization, and that the destruction was intentional to hide their traces? And with that, we reach the end of our strange and fascinating story, a story that makes us ask, is everything we've been told the complete truth, or is there something much bigger we weren't meant to know? My opinion is that there's more to this story, and that the narratives we're told about history sometimes contain far more secrets and mysteries than we imagine. Is what we know about history merely a revised version? And was a great civilization like Tartaria deliberately erased from collective memory? What do you all think? Are you convinced by this, or do you still have questions swirling in your mind? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so you can catch our upcoming mind-blowing videos. See you in a new video, and goodbye!